I'm Greg Jarrett, and you are in the strategy room. President Obama's expected veto of Keystone XL pipeline legislation once again putting the project's future in limbo, with the White House and Congress eventually find compromise on the pipeline. Joining us now to talk about it, political strategist Goodman and Chuck Rocha. Gentlemen, welcome. You know, Chuck, a lot of people are scratching their heads because this thing has been studied over 6.5 years. There have been 5 separate environmental impact reports, and they all agree on the same thing, and I'll read from the last one. There will be no significant increase in carbon emissions by building the pipeline. In fact, they go on to say, to the contrary, it's going to reduce carbon emissions. So why would the president oppose this?
The president's been very upfront about opposing it, so the Congress continues to work on legislation that wastes the taxpayers' dollars on something that's going to be vetoed because the president wants to make sure we have clean water and clean air. It's just like these Republicans would be working on something that he said up front, that he ran on and got reelected by the American people, that he would veto this bill.
Well, in point of fact, let me stick to you for just a second. In a speech 2 years ago, the president said that he would give approval as long as he was convinced that it would not elevate climate change. And based on all 5 of these studies, if the president's going to follow his own standard, shouldn't he approve it?
Well, there's politics involved here. I know that's surprising to people watching, but there's politics involved in everything that happens here. And there's a base of people that got him elected, and environmentalists that fight for this every single day. Right. And he's following the people who got him elected. All
right. Adam, let me turn to you for reaction to that. So in other words, Chuck's essentially admitting here that the president is just pandering to environmentalists, and the environmentalists, if they really want to reduce carbon emissions, should be welcoming the pipeline.
You know, when you don't want something to happen, a lot of times in Washington what you do is you study it to death. And I think that's clearly what is happening here with the president. You know, this is a pipeline that represents 20,000 jobs, $7 billion in economic impact, and most importantly, peace of mind for the American public looking finally for some sign that we're about to approach energy independence in this country. And the more roadblocks the president puts up based on politics and not policy, the more the American public's starting to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I read some of these reports, the executive summaries, and they say, look, if you don't build the pipeline, that oil is going to be transported by rail and by truck, and that hugely, up to 40%, increases the emissions over the pipeline. But look, Adam, I'm going to stick with you now. It's up to Boehner and McConnell to try to override the veto. Do they have the votes?
They don't quite have the votes right now. I think the last vote, for instance, in the Senate was at 63 to override a veto versus the 67 they need. But what we have to remember is what this is all about. And we're reminded just, I think it was this past weekend, with that terrible disaster in West Virginia, with 19 oil-bearing cars on rail going off the tracks with 3 million gallons of crude oil, endangering everything around it. There is no panacea in terms of safety, but there is an answer in terms of American independence, energy independence, and we know where it begins. And the president needs to stop answering to liberals and activists, and he has to start responding and answering to the American public.
Yeah. You know, Chuck, the alternative in the face of not overcoming or overriding a presidential veto is to try to take Keystone, attach it to a larger energy bill that would be tougher for President Obama to reject. What are the prospects of that?
I think you see an interesting coalition, especially on the Democratic side, where there are people that are fighting each other. Imagine this, organized labor that was very strongly behind the president. There's a big swath of those guys who are very pro the Keystone pipeline, and it puts Democrats in a precarious position, especially in the Senate and in the House, when you start talking about these larger bills. So I think there is more of an opportunity for consensus there because you have Democrats fighting each other over different parts of the policy.
Adam, is this a sign of things to come with a divided government? Congress in the hands of Republicans and the White House in the hands of a Democrat? I mean, so that nothing will ever get done.
Greg, I hope not. But, you know, it's looking more and more like that out of the chute. We knew this was the first major issue where Congress and the president actually could work together. This president decided not to do that, and I think he signaled his intentions on this and other fronts about going his own way in the State of the Union speech, and unfortunately it's getting worse.
Yeah. Immigration is another one. Adam Goodman, Chuck Rocha, gentlemen, good to see you. For the latest on the Keystone XL pipeline, stay with FoxNews.com. I'm Greg Jarrett. Thanks for watching.